Are you ready?
Starting now?
Well, now you just messed it up, you knob. God, you know that the shit that we go through for this, huh?
I know. Fuckers better appreciate it. What's the title of this podcast again?
I don't know. Objects, I don't know. Something with a penis, I guess.
Right.
Right. Popular with the ladies.
Right.
Oh, I'm not even going to apologize because hopefully it sounds fucking hilarious.
Yeah, totally. This is fucking explicit now.
The explicit button. Let me use my finger.
La, 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 la.
It is time for another episode of Sober, Not Mature. And that episode starts now. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sober, Not Mature. And first off, yesterday was our 3-month anniversary of this fun-loving podcast. So
Happy anniversary to us.
Congratulations to us. It was funny. I posted it. You may have seen it on Facebook also, but I posted a coin for 3 months and then, put sober anniversary or anniversary for the podcast, whatever it was. But we got congratulated quite a bit. And I started to think, I'm wondering if people thought that it was like one of our 3-month anniversaries, which again, or, I don't care one way or the other. If they start listening back, they're going to realize it's, a few more months than 3, but one way or the other. Yeah. So February 27th. And I look back at it. I think it might have been last weekend because I couldn't remember when, we had, I don't know. I started the page, I think maybe mid-February, but the actual first episode was February 27th. So I just thought it was kind of cool, but that goes along with the stats. And I'll go through this real quick because I'm trying to do this a little bit different. Obviously give the number of where we're at and everything, but also where we increased, which this week, in my opinion, was kind of a big week. So our followers, I think so. You'll hear this in just a second, but our followers went on Instagram up 87 followers to 872.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the number of plays, so individual plays on the podcast, went up 117 this week, and that is 692 individual plays.
Wow. Doing big things.
Yeah. So the top episode, episode 4, is now the 4th at 57 plays. And that, again, is our first 30 days. That's episode 4. Episode 10 is our number 1. And that is, yes, you're right, Mike. The vodka bottle one is, which I still think is kind of funny. I didn't think about that when we were talking about it last week until you brought it up. But yeah, the one with the absolute vodka bottle on there. 63, and then episode 3, which again is still your story, and then episode 13, which is last week's episode. Both of those are tied for 62 plays total, which that's the most that we've had in a single episode in a week. So again, the one we just recorded and released last week Saturday, so a week ago today, has had 62 individual plays, which I thought was pretty amazing. Our demographic, still women, still have 60%, men 35%. We're still crushing it with the folks our age at 45 years old to 59 at 52%. 35 to 44 years old is at 27%, and then the 28 to 34 year olds are 14%, and then a few 1% here there on the other ones. But yeah, the biggest thing was, and I was watching the number of plays, obviously, rise up throughout the week, but it wasn't clicking, that it had been over 100. So I've got notes and stuff I made from each week. So I still have all the notes from probably the last, 5 or 6 weeks, so I've got these sheets, and I looked and I'm like, damn.
And they said we wouldn't last.
Yeah, well, we're 3 months into that. We still have 9 months to fail. So stick around, guys. Maybe that. What's that?
We're doing our best.
Yeah, exactly. Doing our best not to fail. But yes, to that motherfucker that said 90% fail in the first year, we're 3 months in and actually thriving so far. I don't know if I want to use that word, but thriving I think might be a decent enough word.
Right.
So couple of comments which I thought were funny. First of all, the individual in California, I mean, she's really cool, and she had commented on the and I know I keep talking about her that she's really cool, and she just is. But she had commented on the anniversary post, and she's like, "Wow, 3 months already." And then she said, "She goes, I'm still pulling." She goes, "I'm still pulling for you two cuties."
She has vision problems.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she's the one that originally said that that we sound cute together. So she just she plays that still every once in a while, which I think is funny. But a comment that came in this morning, and this was just on just a regular message or comment. I don't know if he sent me a message. I can't remember if it was a comment on one of the one of the posts I had, and it's somebody that's been following us for a little bit. But he says he starts off his comment of, "Well, fuck, you two assholes done got me making the bed and shit this morning." And I thought about that. I'm like, well, at least we know somebody's listening to something. I messaged back or commented back. I'm just like, that's awesome. I said, good habits, my friend. So yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny.
Making our little corner of the world a better place. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. So you had to, and I've got one way or the other. I'm going to bitch a little bit about work just to get it out of my head, if nothing else. But so you had to work yesterday, which normally Friday is your off day, right? And that's one of the reasons we didn't record last night, which is cool. I mean, I had a long and ridiculously hard week, and I know Mike had to work yesterday, so that was out of the ordinary though for you to work, right?
Yeah. I picked up a 6th day. I'm trying to make a little extra money because I got some things going on this summer that gonna cost some cash. So try to bank it up when I can. But yeah, so I worked a 6th day yesterday, and it was like I said, I usually don't work Fridays, and rush hour Friday, and let's add the holiday weekend to it. It was insane on the road yesterday. I got caught behind a fatal crash on 21, which is one of the main roads here. Yeah, it was. They were just idiots, extra special idiotic yesterday. So yeah, it was fun. But I made it out safe and sound because I am a professional.
Well, and you know what? I mean, yeah, you talk about fatality. I mean, that's obviously no fun. And that it just reminded me when it was probably a handful of years ago now, I was heading out to Ohio. And if I ever go out to Ohio for the weekend, I try to take off on Friday, drive out that day, usually, like we did when I went out for our anniversary weekend.
Right.
We try to hit a meeting on Friday, and then worst case scenario, I'll come back on Sunday, but whatever. So I do it on purpose. First of all, leaving on that day, but I don't leave usually not till 9, because same deal. I mean, Milwaukee traffic is not super terrible, but it's not great. But
right.
I got to kind of time myself getting around Chicago, but I don't even think I was on the road for it. I remember where the backup was. It was within the first hour, and there was construction on 94 South heading out of Wisconsin, and I got stuck like for an hour or longer. And again, of course, I'm just sitting there. I'm bitching, and I'm like, man, I got places to go, people to see. Well,
right. Do you know who I think I am?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect example. So, all said and done, what happened was this guy, and it was kind of it was a tragic story. That first of all, the guy died. I mean, that's number one. The guy died. So tragic in and of itself. But he had apparently, I don't know if he had tried to abduct his girlfriend or wife, or the police were after him, So that was the whole point. He was buzzing down the freeway and lost control of his car and ran into one of the a paver, like one of those big highway pavers.
Yeah, a Jersey wall.
Yeah, and it just
Yeah.
like exploded his car. It was a mess, So all said and done, I was pissed off about being stuck in traffic, and I'm like, ooh. Part of me is like, ooh, the guy died. That's bad. Then I'm like, oh, he was a piece of shit anyhow. So well,
Yeah, right.
which again, that's how my head works. But yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, no big deal. I mean, I just I'm heading out to Indiana. Well, shortly after we're done, and if anyone hears any rustling going on, I'm packing up some of my stuff while we're doing this because one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to get my grocery shopping done because I'm not coming back until Tuesday morning. But I just went ahead and I did it last night. So.
Right.
But yeah, no, all I got to do is pack. I can't remember the last time that I'd done grocery shopping on a Friday. It was weird. I mean, I pulled into Aldi, of course, one of the stores I'd go to, and I thought they were closed. There was like nobody in the parking lot.
Nice.
Yeah, well, people out actually doing things other than grocery shopping on a Friday night, I suppose. But yeah, so again, if you're already rustling, that's just me kicking around here. But yeah, so on and like I said, I got work. I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about our first jobs, and you had talked, the company you're working for, and the fact that you want to retire from there, and I had mentioned that obviously work stress with me, and it is. It's just things are busy. I mean, we're short staffed. I mean, a lot of places are dealing with that, but I'm one of the managers. So I'm one of three managers, and no kidding. I mean, we're doing, the three of us are probably doing the work of ideally 5 or 6 people that could be in that spot. But our owner, and this is the first part of my bitch, he's a short-sighted dick in a lot of cases. And there's just no better way to put it, because he doesn't, every time we lose somebody, whether they, choose to leave or go on to a different thing, whatever the deal is, he tries to figure out a way to fill somebody into that spot without having to pay somebody, that he hired. And he doesn't pay us more.
Right.
Because I'm like, well, if I'm doing the job of 3 people, can you pay me 3 times what I'm paying?
Right. At least 2 times.
Yeah, and I think I joked about that one time, and he didn't think it was funny. So, so the other thing that works, the management bonuses are paid out quarterly, and he delays it. So first quarter, I mean, if anyone does the math, I mean, it's 3 months, right? End of March was the end of first quarter, but he doesn't pay out the first bonus until like 6 weeks later. So it's a second pay period in May, second quarter again. It's like 6 weeks later, because it's based off of the profitability of the company, which when I first started, and here, this is where my whole problem runs in. When I first started, he explained this, and I asked the question, because first of all, anytime I've been in a job where I've been in most jobs where I can earn something, bonus, commission, incentives, that sort of thing.
Right.
And I'm fine with it. I mean, I've done that with very few exceptions since I was like 19 years old. So for a long time, I've been able to earn, and I say this quote unquote, on top of what I'm paid. So I asked him, I said, what's the, here's the salary that I need. And whatever I ask for now at this point in my life and my career, I always ask for a salary that I know I can pay my bills and have a little bit extra, so I'm not just, going to work and coming home type of thing.
Right.
So he agreed to that, and then we were talking about bonuses, and he gave me a figure. He said usually about this, and he gave me this figure, which basically was an opportunity for me to earn like another 25% of my salary in bonuses and commissions. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, that's fucking perfect,
Right.
So that didn't happen the first year, and I'm in coming up almost next month will be my 2-year anniversary there, and it hasn't happened so far. So I started hitting him up about a month ago. I'm like, you figure bonuses, what are we looking at, this and that? He's like, oh, that figure, blah, blah, blah. So on Wednesday or Tuesday, no, it's Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday morning, it doesn't really matter. Very close. The payroll's got to be turned in by Wednesday, and I think it might have been Wednesday morning. He tells me on what my bonus is going to be, and it was about a third of what I thought might be acceptable.
Right.
So what I'm like, okay, and again, we've done. I've been doing a lot. He's been spreading me really thin over the last 6 months.
Mhm.
So it was like a third of what I thought might be acceptable. And I'm going back and forth on this with him. I'm like, geez, I said, Q1's supposed to be our big one. I'm like, this looks pretty grim for, the rest of my earning potential for the rest of the year. And he's like,
Right.
costs are this and costs are that. And here's the one cost that he put in there. This he considered a cost, which will give you a mindset of or an idea where his mindset's at. So this year so far, collector bonuses. So the bonuses that we pay out to collectors are up by 63%.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, we are a collection agency. Okay. Just
Right.
follow me for a minute. And our job is to, I'm just going to ask you, what do you think the job of a collection agency is to do?
It's to collect money.
There you go. And when that happens, when the individuals are doing that, they get paid commission, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, I'm talking to you like you're a 3-year-old to make a point.
Mhm.
If bonuses are up by 63%, that's probably a good thing, right?
I would think so. You're bringing in 63% more money.
Yeah, and I'm the collection manager, so I'm directly number one responsible for that. But it to good and bad. If things are down, I get the heat. But if things are up, I should get the praise. Well,
Absolutely.
so that didn't make any sense. But so here's where to wrap all this shit up in a nice little recovery bow. What I wanted to say was fuck you, you fucking fuck, and walk out the door. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, but I didn't. But I did kind of in my head. I was just kind of, man, it just kind of it fucked me up a little bit because I got everyone's got things to do, and I've got things to do that are coming up in the very near future, like you just said. And I'm glad you
Right.
brought that up. Got some things going on this summer that are gonna cost some cash, so you got to make the money, right?
Right.
So that didn't happen. I mean, just little thing. I need new tires on my car. I mean, I'm like, okay. I mean, that's fine. I can do it. But all these different, that's what I wanted to do. And then the other thing that I was going to do, I was going to go home that night and I was going to open up my resume on fucking every search site I could, including the one that I know he's searching for people to handle things a little bit when I go remote here in a month.
Right.
So I know, he would see it, right? So that's what I was going to do. But I didn't. So
Right.
by the time I got home, I'm like, okay. So I stepped back and I thought about these things. And there's a software company that the guy messaged me, I don't know, through LinkedIn probably a month ago, kind of going back and forth. And, I messaged him. That's what I did. And I'm like, hey, do you still want to talk? And he does. So I'm going to talk to him on my way back from Indiana on Tuesday. So it might be an opportunity. Now, after that, yeah, if it doesn't work out, I mean, I'm going to have to figure out something because I can't do this. And I'm not happy about it, but I guess like I said, when I thought about it on a recovery standpoint, is I took a breath, I paused, it messed me up in my head and didn't ruin my day because we talked about that. But I had a couple of bad moments those next couple of days.
Right.
But, I mean, one way or the other, and you remember what people said when it came to, or let me ask you, do you remember what people told us when we started working again? And if a job wasn't working out, do you remember that the main thing that they told us now that we're sober were
Employable.
there you go. Thank you.
Yep.
See? And I am. I don't know. I mean, the thing of it is, I know that I can find a job doing something, out
Right.
there. Even if I have to take a little bit of a pay cut, I would do that to be happy because that's a thing. I'm not happy with what I'm doing, and money is one thing, but there's got to be. I don't know. I mean, everyone wants to be appreciated too for the work that they're doing, and
Absolutely.
you can pay me a whole lot of money, but if I'm not happy doing it, the money sooner or later the money's not going to matter. But
Right.
so yeah, that was my work thing, and I just figured, one way or the other, they always tell us we should get this at least out in the open and talk about it because don't they say that talking about something cuts a problem in half? Is that the term?
Yeah. That's what I've heard.
I thought I heard that too. Yeah. So,
You know,
but
it's funny. I'm like you said, I was stressed out yesterday, and it was just it was a bad day. But right, so I get home and I got in the shower and cleaned up, and I'm standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and I looked and I was like, you know what? Yes, this is a bad day. I'm stressed out. It's all good, but you know what? It's over with. And deep down, even though I was a mess when I got home, um, I was okay. Deep down, I had that peace and that serenity that they promised me because I got through it. It was over, and my foundation is solid, and no matter what life can throw at me, certainly drinking and using was not even in my mind. It was a bad day. I was stressed out, and I got through it. I have the tools today to be able to handle life throwing shit at me all day long. So that was a pretty good thing. I like that.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I thought about that, during that time frame, but didn't think about it when I was just talking. And when we had talked about whatever episode it was about, people saying that they don't think about drinking, in a situation like that, same deal. I didn't think about that. I'm going to go out and get drunk or anything like that. But,
Right.
that's a perfect example of, of me thinking in my head, man, if this would have been, especially 13 years ago, even 12 and a half years ago, um, I would have gotten home and I would have gotten ripped up and I probably would have done everything that I shouldn't have done.
Right.
because I didn't know at that time. I didn't know what to do. Now, granted, I was in, and it doesn't happen that long, thankfully. In the person that I've been talking to, I mean, I was texting back and forth with her a little bit, and
Mhm.
I just told her, I'm like, man, because this is probably probably the first time that I've been in a shitty mood since we've been talking back and forth, and I just told her
Right.
at one point, I'm like, man, I don't. I don't feel right. I'm all fucked up in the head about this, but I said, I'm going to bed.
Well,
and and I said, sometimes my mind is like a computer. I said, more than likely it'll reset and I'll be cool in the morning. And I woke up in the morning. And I was still, first thought of my mind was I was pissed. And I'm like, fuck me. So, that was like Thursday. I had another weird day, and I got myself out of it. But, you know,
Mhm.
but the whole point is that, and I'm so glad you said that the tools, we have the tools to deal with this, where that even if the thoughts like, yeah, this is what I would have done, that's part of the process. And for me, I need to know what I used to do so I don't do it
Right.
again.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't forget what the asshole that we used to be.
Yeah, and the asshole still lives inside me, considering the fact that seriously, I just wanted to, fuck you, you fucking fuck, is what I wanted to say,
Right.
and I was just that I'm just in this anger inside of me. I barely wanted to look at him, and we had to sit down for an interview too. So on
Mm.
Thursday, I think we were in an interview. I mean, I held myself fine on the interview, but I'm like, as
Right.
soon as this interview's done, and I did, when she was walking out, I started getting up. Sometimes we'll sit there and we'll shoot the shit afterwards, and I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
can't. I'm like, I don't trust myself, man. I can't sit here and shoot the shit with him. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I look at that. I'm like, maybe that's a good thing that I knew. I just, you gotta get my fucking ass out of here. I'm going to say some shit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Take myself out of the situation, man, because, like you said, I don't trust myself, and I still don't sometimes.
Yeah. And it's weird, and I don't, and again, I mean, I understand to a certain extent where he's coming from, but he's extreme, and, he's got these ways about him, but, I just
Mhm.
need to, my choices. And here's something that my dad told me, but my grandpa told him. First time I ever heard this was I had to have been probably 7 or 8 years old, so a couple of years ago, right?
Right.
My dad said to me that my grandpa used to say that, hey, if you're going to work, put in and he used to say, put in your 8 hours of work for your 8 hours of pay.
Mhm.
If you're not happy with the job or you don't like it, don't badmouth it and don't badmouth the man. Go find a different job.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know, and I guess I was just bad mouthing the man, so I guess I didn't. that wasn't perfect, but you know, I did it in my head and on a podcast where nobody listens to this, right? So you know,
Right.
I can be pretty sure that he's not going to hear it. I pretty much know that, but yeah. So anyhow, that was a little bit of bitching, but you know, I tried to start it off happy with the anniversary stuff, and I'm not in a shitty mood anymore. I know what I got to do, and it's going to happen one way or the other, you know, and I'll get my work situation figured out one way or the other. But one of the things I heard a couple of days ago, did you hear that Steven Tyler relapsed?
Yeah, I saw that.
So, and you know, the first thing was I'm like, shit, because I can't keep track of these celebs and these musicians anymore. Like, what's his name from Metallica, James Hetfield? I mean, he's been sober back and forth, I mean, for years, and then went back into rehab, I don't know, within the last year.
Right.
But the thing that and again, here's my old ways. Now I'm looking at how long was he sober? How did this happen? You know, but it was just stupid when I started looking at it. But I think one of the articles said that, I think this time somebody said he'd been, you know, sober for 12 years. So maybe we're in the wrong. Maybe it's, maybe we should be worried.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, I guess he had some surgery and, you know, got back on the pills or something is what I read.
Right.
I don't know. I being the asshole that I am, on one of the posts, I put grandma needs to get her shit together.
There are a ton of memes with him, and the one that I think is the funniest goes along that line, saying that Steven Tyler looks like that mom that used to let people drink at a house party or something like that.
Exactly.
And he does. I mean, he looks what. First time I saw that meme, I seriously I couldn't stop laughing. But yeah, I just figured that was, if nothing else, notable. But yeah, I kind of feel the same way. But other thing that I thought about, and I don't know that we have talked about this yet. We talked about the fact that we had the same sponsor for a period of time, of course, but how did you get, and I know who your first sponsor was, but how did you end up getting your first sponsor?
Yeah, so it was West Park Men's. I had gotten into the Keating Center on Wednesday, and the deal was we were supposed to get a sponsor within our first week, right? So I had stood up at a couple meetings and said I needed a sponsor, and nobody had responded. I was getting a little resentful because, you know, it was all about me, man. They come on, sponsor me. So it was the following Wednesday. It was that week, and I was like, okay, I've got to get a sponsor tonight. And Bob S had been up there, and he found out later he was out of spite, which is wonderful. Had gone up there and led for like an hour and a half. Man, it was horrible. But so he gets done, and there's comments and all that stuff, and so I walk up to him after the meeting's over, and he's still up by the podium, and I go, "Hey man, I need a sponsor." And he looks at me and he goes, "You want me to be your sponsor?" I just need a sponsor. I don't care. I need a sponsor. So he ended up, one of his sponsees was about a year and a half sober, and he handed me off to him, this guy, Tim. And it was perfect. Tim was my sponsor for about the first year. And he helped me get through those first 7 steps. And yeah, you know, it was just perfect. He is a sort of musician. Bob was too. He was a bass player. And you know, it just worked out. It was what it was supposed to happen. That's what happened. It was great. Tim ended up relapsing because he stopped doing the work. Yeah, so that was my first sponsor, man. It was out of desperation and spite, and it was the way it was supposed to be. How'd you get your first sponsor?
Well, you know what's funny is when you mentioned West Park Men's, and first of all, this was a, I mean, what would you say there? There was usually, without even joking, probably what, 200 was there 200 plus people there usually?
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge men's meeting. Still is.
Okay. And that was one that as soon as we didn't have to go, we stopped going.
Right.
But I actually met my sponsor, and I forgot about the where, but I met my first sponsor also at West Park Men's. So it would have been the
Uh-huh.
the week before, because I got it on Friday, same deal, and we were told to get a sponsor, so it had to have been that first Wednesday.
Mhm.
And Marty introduced me to, at that point, my sponsor's brother was 3/4. He was living in the trailer, and I
Mhm.
forget his first name, but my sponsor's first name was Bill, and he's like introduced me to his brother, and his brother's like, "Yeah," he goes, "You'll be at West Park. I'll introduce you to my brother. You know, he's going to be your sponsor." I'm like, "Okay, cool." To your exact point, we had to do it.
Mhm.
I didn't care. You know, I seriously didn't care about getting a sponsor. It
Right.
wasn't. I wasn't like, "Ooh, this person's going to help me get sober."
Uh,
Wasn't it? Thought never crossed my mind. But so he introduces me to this guy, and like I said, it was. I remember walking in, and there was always this group of new guys that were in. You know, sometimes stood in that line having to shake hands, and that's how they got people. You know, out of their self, right? I think was probably part of the purpose.
mhm.
So he introduces me, and I think at the time he was 16 or 17 years sober. First of all, one of the nicest and most genuine men that you'd ever want to meet.
Mhm.
And of course, same thing. And I know I mentioned this in another episode, if not 17 times. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to get sober. I didn't want to stay. So I told him, I said, all I need, and here's me. And again,
Let me tell you how this is going to work.
right. So at this point, I get it on Friday. This is Wednesday, and
Mhm.
I've been sober, not even not even a week. Well, yeah, a little over a week now, a week and 10
Right.
days, whatever. I'm like, here's what I need, and I'm like, I just need a temporary sponsor, and I'm
Mhm.
only going to be here for maybe 30 days, maybe 60. But
Right.
I'm heading back to Wisconsin, and Bill was and I mentioned this before. He was so smooth, and he was so cool. It's just like, that's cool. He goes, I'm fine with that. If
Mhm.
you just need me temporarily, he goes, I'll help you, whatever it was. But just kind
Right.
of laid back, and I can only imagine now in his head, he's like, yeah, you have no idea what you fucking need. so so I started doing that. And we went to that's the meeting we went to every week was West Park Men's. He would take me,
Right.
I'd meet him or he picked me up to begin with.
Mhm.
Actually, yeah, picked me up while I was there. Um, but we would go to one meeting a week. He'd stop by the Keating Center every once in a while. He didn't make me call him every day. That's kind of a deal with a lot of sponsors. It made me do that,
Right.
but I did. I would check in with him, and he was just he's very cool. He's the one that taught me about how to figure out, make sure my sobriety date was right. He's the one that taught me, the difference between religion and sobriety. And because I
Mhm.
asked him one time, and I remember driving, we were pulling into West Park, and I said, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about, going back to church. And I said, we're hearing a lot of the God stuff. I'm like, and I was still, I didn't know, I knew I wasn't a God guy. And I know I've said that before, but I
Right.
didn't know if that's something that I just didn't know. I didn't know anything. And
Right.
he told me, he goes, if you want to go to church, go to church. And I said, well, I don't really want to. And he, and he said, then don't.
Right.
And he goes, where do you feel comfortable? And I said, at this point, I'm like, I don't know, but I don't feel
Mhm.
comfortable in church. But I'm starting to feel a little bit comfortable, I think, in a meeting. I said a little bit.
In the basement.
And that's what he said. That is it.
Really?
Swear to God, that's what he said. He goes, I'd rather sit in the basement of a church than upstairs.
Yep.
And so that's seriously, I'm like, dude, that man. But no, seriously, that's what he told me. So, and not that I would have, and now I have, again, nothing against organized religion. Everyone knows how you feel, how I feel, and what our backgrounds
Mhm.
are, whys behind it. But he just made me feel comfortable and cared for and all those different things. Now,
Right.
the short story with him, he had when he was a kid, had some sort of pancreatic issue, and they had surgery done when he was a kid, and they had to take out like a part of his pancreas.
Mm.
Well, what ended up happening is that he developed pancreatic cancer,
Right.
and he died. He died sober.
Mhm.
That's when I took on my second sponsor. My second sponsor took me on, which was Joe, the one that sponsored both Mike and I.
Right.
But that just reminded me too, and that's coming up on. It was God. I was just I was 2.5 years sober, I think, when he died. He died in December or January. Well, either December 2012 or January 13, or somewhere in that area, because I
Right.
moved back to Wisconsin shortly after that.
Mhm.
But here's the other thing too. So at that point, you figure he had 18, 19 years sober. I had never been to a, like, I mean, we went to the funeral home to the people, but I went to his funeral, and the funeral home was set up kind of at the beginning off a busy road. I think Lorraine, for whatever reason, it was in North Olmsted, I think,
Mhm.
but it was a off a main road, but then the subdivision behind. And I'm not kidding you, the subdivision streets were lined with cars. I couldn't find a place to park.
Right.
I ended I had to go like 3 blocks down, park in the parking lot of a strip mall, and walk over. And I walked in, and not only was and this was a big church, the whole church
Mhm.
was filled. The whole lobby area was filled. They had, the like a speaker in there so you could hear. And I couldn't even get up. I couldn't even see into the church area. That's how
Right.
many people this guy touched in his life. And that's the
Mhm.
first time that I got to experience that, what this guy had done. And I knew he was a good dude. But and the cool part too, when the priest was talking, he morphed in this whole back and forth of sobriety and religion, and just did it
Mhm.
in a cool way. But the
Right.
main point was, I couldn't. I was blown away at the amount of people, and I didn't. Here's the other thing that I thought was important. I didn't see anyone crying, not even
Right.
one.
Right.
And at the time, I didn't think about it, but afterwards, I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. What was happening was people were celebrating his life, not his death, which
Mhm.
wild thing. That complete contradiction to what we dealt with, when we went to these other, these people who OD'd and died and all that stuff.
Right.
So he lived a good life, and I was like, man, it was just, I don't know, all that stuff just popped into my head. But yeah, he sponsored me until he couldn't, and I am forever grateful for everything that he taught me. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So those were our first sponsors. So you had a second one, and then Joe, right?
Right. Yeah, I had yeah, my second one was fairly brief. He's actually a friend of ours, and he he relapsed as well. And I started to think it was me. My God, I'm driving these people to drink and use. Um, but of course it wasn't. That was just my ego. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do. I stayed sober though, and Joe, my third sponsor, yeah, explained that to me. He said, "No, it's not you, asshole. It's them." Uh, yeah. So and honestly, Joe technically is still my sponsor, although I haven't talked to him in quite a while. When he first took me on, I was worried he was going to make me like work some steps again. And he just looked at me and he said, "Man, you're doing the thing. You know what you're doing." I believe his words were, "That cake is already baked. I don't need to mix it up again."
I think I remember him saying that. That's awesome.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
in
So
the oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, but I mean, like I said, I haven't even talked to him in a long time. I don't go to the meetings that he goes to anymore. But I also know that anytime I could pick up the phone and he would answer it, So and vice versa, he could always call me. And speaking of phone calls, um, a friend of a friend of a friend reached out to me last night, and he was just like, "Hey, man, I know he's in the 12-step thing, and we've been friends on Facebook and back and forth and stuff." And he private messaged me last night and just said, "Hey, man, can I talk to you?" And this was last night when I got home, and I was a mess. And I messaged him back because that's what we're supposed to do. And I said, "Hey, man, is this an emergency? I need to talk to you, or is this just I'm feeling iffy? I have some questions. I need to talk to you." And he said it's the latter. So we're going to talk to him after the podcast today. But it's kind of cool, man. It's nice being able to to help other people, to be there for other people. I'm going to call him up, and he actually said, I need some out. He's still in a sober living facility. He's been there for a couple years, and he said, I need some outside 12-step friends. He's part of the horror community here in Cleveland, and horror.
Right, not horror.
Right. He's an artist, cartoonist. He's, we've been back and forth, and it's just going to be cool. Yeah. So I'm kind of looking forward to being able to reach out. Me, that's the fucked up part, man. Me, this person that doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody, is almost looking forward to reaching out and starting a conversation and possibly even a friendship with this guy. So it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the same thing, that like when you just said, and that would be my same response: is this something that needs to happen right now? Because I know, I mean, you didn't want to do this last night, and I know you enjoy this. Mm-hmm. So possibly getting on the phone with something that and not that you wouldn't enjoy it, and that's probably a bad way to put it, but maybe not being in the right mindset to deal with that. But no, that's mm-hmm. perfect, because. And it's been probably the last time that happened to me. Oh, that the person from California, when she had, asked me to message that guy that was having mm-hmm. some issues, and and she's like, are you okay with doing that? In my head, I was just like, damn, yeah, but it's. And I messaged him during the day while I was at work, and I said, I'm at work, but I said, I said, as long as it's okay. I said, I'm a little tied up, but can I message you later? It's the same deal. And I never thought about it until you just said this. I was looking forward to that messaging conversation when I got home. It's it's weird, right? Yeah, it's weird. Right. Just really weird. So the other thing with Joe, when you had said that about maybe it was you making people drink. I remember the three of us sitting down at one point, and Joe came out. I'm like, well, yeah, he's made two of his sponsors drink. And I think Joe even said that. He's like, yeah, he goes, I don't know if I want to sponsor both you guys. He's like, both your previous sponsor drank, you killed yours. Right. And I'm like, yeah, our track record didn't look too good for Joe, but, mm-hmm. and Joe's still sober. He's had a couple of things, some life moments that have happened to him, but right. He's sober and he's alive and kicking, and he's just every time after I left too, because what he told me was, because I probably asked him the question. I'm like, now, because I mean, it was still when I was in Wisconsin, I didn't get a sponsor right away, which he was getting on me about, rightfully so. And mm-hmm. He goes, you can still turn to me. He goes, I'm the only way I'm never, or I'm not going to be your sponsor anymore is if you fire me. And I said, I wouldn't do that. And mm-hmm. He goes, I'm just telling you, this is a lifelong commitment for me. He goes, I'd always be here for you. He goes, but you need to get somebody, local like that. But then every time I come back to Ohio, because we used to go to 2 meetings sometimes when I went back on Fridays. We'd go to Who Do You right. Know, and then, Gordon Square. And mm-hmm. I remember, you and I'd be standing out in that little breezeway area outside, and he'd come walking up, and he'd give me these. He'd walk up to me, he'd step back, he'd check me out head to toe, and he's like, "Yeah, you still look sober." Yep. But yeah, Joe's a great dude, and same deal when I started working with him, and when I found out that my sponsor was, and I knew he was sick, but when it got down to the point where I knew through a family member or something like that he wasn't going to be able to be available for me. Right. I remember it was on a Thursday night, because I was secretary of that Thursday night meeting at the Keating Center. Right. And Joe came in, and before I started, because he knew Bill, and he knew everything that was going on, and I had kind of I talked to Joe a little bit, but I said now's the time. I said I need you, and he's like, cool. He said, let's we'll talk after the meeting or whatever. So that's when he became my sponsor. But mm-hmm. I think he said the same thing. He used to tell us that. I remember telling us, he's like, ah, shit. He goes, you guys are easy to deal with. Right. Which I thought was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, we saw him. We'd always see him at Who Do You Know, and anything that we ever needed, I talked to him about everything. Mm-hmm. Usually, as I've said before, I talked to you first, and then we'd go talk to Joe. But no, I mean, he was both of them. I mean, all of our sponsors were a huge part, like you said, even for the the ones that relapse for you. I mean, going back to whatever episode that was, I mean, there's no bad examples, right?
Absolutely not.
So, oh, I know. Speaking of meetings, and I'm just kind of looking at time here. We got some time.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of meetings, so when and I mentioned last week between like Wisconsin meetings and Cleveland meetings, and
Mhm.
I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit because it's there. There's got to be people out there. I mean, I know there are. I'm not the only one that went from one area to the other, and I have been to different meetings, not just in Cleveland and in Wisconsin, but
Right.
I've been to Florida. I've been to meetings in Illinois. Trying to think where else I've been that I went to meetings, but so I've been to some meetings here and there in different places. God, my phone. I think this might have been on my end. My phone was just kind of buzzing a little bit. Sorry about that if it comes up on the recording, but hey, it is what it is, right? But
I didn't hear it out this end.
yeah, and the last time it happened, it came up on the recording, but so one way or the other, it was just a brief thing. So when I was in Cleveland, we used to all go to there. There's a difference for anyone who doesn't know. There's what they call lead, or here they call them speaker meetings, where an
Right.
individual stands up in front of the room at a table, at a podium, whatever, and tells their story. Sometimes
Mhm.
there's a comment time, this and that, but that's what it is. One person, quote unquote, leading or speaking at the meeting.
Right.
Whereas there's also discussion meetings and there's also book study meetings, and
Right.
all of which we went to in Ohio. But all the main meetings that I was going to and that you were going to also, for the most part,
Mhm.
were lead meetings. So we're
Right.
just sitting back and we're taking in information. And this was for the first 3 years and whatever it was, 3-4 months for me.
Mhm.
So I get to Wisconsin, I find the clubs, and they're all the ones with the exception of the Friday meeting at the club I went to were all discussion meetings. And it
Mhm.
was weird because I'm like, okay, so now it's all these people talking. I understood the format and it wasn't anything that I didn't get, but it was just odd. So then I set myself, well, first of all, at the one, they would have like the big book, wherever the big book was, somebody was, and I'll say this again, quote unquote, stuck with reading how it works. And that's chapter
Uh-huh.
5 in the big book for anyone who doesn't know. Um, Honestly, the beginning of that, how it works, is one of my favorite things because
Right.
it tells you how it works.
Yeah. Imagine that.
I know, and I love it. To this day, I love it. So I figured out that some people are like, "Oh, I don't want to read and whatever." So what I started doing was, when I go into that meeting, I would sit down either in front of the book or grab one of the big books that was in front of me, and I'd volunteer, because that was my way. Even if I didn't have a chance to speak, because sometimes you didn't, if it didn't get around the table,
Mhm.
I wanted to do something. I wanted to be active in the meeting.
Be a part
So
of.
exactly. Yeah, be a part of. And so I did that, and you sometimes would have a chance to speak, but then I made it a goal to always, if given the opportunity, I wasn't going to jump over somebody just so I could talk, but that
Right.
was my goal. Even if I had nothing to say, because I learned that. You remember learning that at the Keating Center
Right.
in in meditation. Marty never let anyone just pass. You have to say something.
Mhm.
So again, it was one of those old habits. But then now, almost 3.5 years later, at that time, I was doing the same thing. So then I went to all discussion meetings, unless I went back to Cleveland, is when I would go to a lead meeting.
Mhm.
And then the club I went to here and where I live now, or close to that, same thing. They would have every once in a while. They would have like a monthly speaker meeting. Only time I ever went to that, because I used to go to the Saturday meeting, which I was the secretary of here. It
Right.
was usually at 8 o'clock at night. The only time I ever went to that, they asked me to lead one time. So other than that, I'd go to the 5 o'clock and then be done with that, or 5:30, whatever it was. But
Mhm.
so the difference though in Wisconsin AA and Cleveland AA, and there's a distinct difference. Even like Florida meetings were kind of fun. It was a little bit more
Mhm.
lighthearted, a little bit more laid back, a little bit different format, but I still enjoyed it. Same thing with the Illinois meetings. But the difference between, and I mentioned this before, Cleveland AA, very structured, very, I'll just call it hardcore. And I don't mean that in a bad
Yep.
way.
Nope.
Um, Old school hardcore. This is what it is. This is AA, and this is what we're going to teach you. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons that I said, I think in the last episode, that I would, if I were in Cleveland, I know I would go to more meetings. The people is one thing, and I do like the people around here, but the meetings and the structure, it's just what I knew and what I was taught, what we were taught.
Right.
So every once in a while, it would just get some people talking about some shit that was outside, or or watered down, maybe the best way to put it, from what we were taught. And you and I went to one of the meetings when you were here 5-6 years ago.
Right.
Do you remember that at all? And we were sitting outside because it was nice out that day. But do you remember that feeling like it was a little bit watered down? There was hugs going on, which I know you love.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like Cleveland AA. Akron, I suppose. But this is the cradle of it. This is where it started. I mean, it started in Akron, and the first major city that it spread to was Cleveland, right up the road. The oldest men's meeting in the world, Doan's Men's, is here in Cleveland, Ohio. This is where it's at, man. I love it. I mean, we talked about meetings. I was introduced to the rooms out in California long before I got sober, and I mean, I know people stay sober out there doing it their way, but it was very watered down, very touchy-feely, very, your feelings are important. And Cleveland AA is the exact opposite of that. Your feelings don't fucking matter here. And that's what I needed. I needed to not be ruled by my feelings, man. Your actions are what matter. That's what's drilled into our head here over and over again. It doesn't matter what you're thinking. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. It matters what you're doing. And that's how this drunk stays sober for a dozen years. Yeah, Cleveland AA is hardcore, man. And that's what this drunk needed. I didn't need, we'll love you till you can love yourself. Fuck that. You're gonna start acting like a decent human being. That's what's gonna happen. And then you keep doing that over and over again. Guess what? You're doing the right thing over and over again. You will start to love yourself, because you're doing the next right thing. That's how this needed to work for me. Yeah, not this. We'll take you in and we'll embrace you and we'll make you feel better. Fuck that. Feel like shit. Like shit for years and years and years. Start acting decently, and you keep doing that over and over again. You will like yourself because you're doing the next right thing. That's Cleveland AA, man.
Yeah, and I, like you just said, that you needed that. I didn't know that I needed that. I didn't know that I needed that until I didn't have it.
Right.
But when I speaking of Joe, I remember going back to being back in Cleveland and telling him, and I said same thing when I first got there. Everything's different. Which again is not necessarily a bad thing, because thankfully I had that base. And I'm not saying that I couldn't have gotten sober and stayed sober in Wisconsin with Wisconsin meetings. I'm not saying that,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
but the path that I followed and the path that we followed, as it turns out, first of all, it's the only thing we know. That's number one, maybe. But
right.
But the other most important thing is that I know how I was and I know how I still am. And if I wouldn't have gotten my ass checked,
Yep.
I have doubts, if nothing else. I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad everything that we went through. I'm glad that we went through all of it. But I told Joe, I said, here's the thing. I said, these discussion meetings are opening up a whole new area of my mind. I said, now I get to listen to all the stories, not just one. And I still get to take everything that I knew and build this in here. But now I get to hear all these people every week. And I said, it's actually really cool. So
Mm-hmm.
It turned out to be a great addition, but I already had the base there. I already had the foundation. And
Right.
it just, again, it was, some of the stuff was like, yes, it still is super watered down. And the only thing that I ran into, which there was one meeting when I moved to Germantown, where I'm at now,
Mm-hmm.
there's like two main meetings. They have like two different clubs right within 20 minutes of where I live. And I went to the one a couple of times and the meeting was fine, and I actually know a lot of people I know here that go to the other meeting now. It was the meeting at the other club that I went to was an offshoot of this original club.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the same people and all that sort of thing. But the difference is that I was at one of these meetings the one time, and I only went to two at the first club. And let me step back a little bit. Mequon, where these meetings are, one's in Thiensville, one's in Mequon. They're not poor areas. Okay, that's
Right.
that's probably the first thing. And most of the time, most of the people around here, and I haven't noticed in a lot of meetings, but people don't talk about their status and this and that, because you got some people that in my opinion, if you're in and you're run down, and you got nothing, you don't need to hear about the guy going out on his boat that afternoon. It just,
Right.
I don't know. Just I don't think there's a place for that. I'm not saying it's wrong. You got to think, know the room, judge the room, know the audience, all this sort of things.
Uh-huh.
So I'm at this one meeting, and it was before the meeting. We're sitting around, and this girl, and she was probably early 20s, and she's talking about, I think she had only been back then, a week or a couple of weeks. She was really new, but she's talking
Right.
about all the struggles, all the things she lost. She's trying to get her kids back. She doesn't have a car anymore because she lost that. She's riding her bike. I mean, these serious struggles. She's staying with a friend, basically couch surfing, with
Mm-hmm.
friends. I mean, she's got like nothing. Just started
Right.
working again, can barely scrape enough money together to, to eat and all this different stuff. And so she's telling that conversation, and then these other two people start talking about their investments and how much money they made and all. And I'm looking at the girl, and she's just kind of sitting there. And I swear to God, you could see her shoulders just kind of go in, and she's like in a
Right.
corner of one of the couches, and I'm like, this is fucking shitty,
Yep.
And they weren't talking to her, but they were talking about all this stuff. And she can barely scrape enough money together to eat and is trying to get her daughter back. And I'm like, fuck this, man. I'm done. I didn't go to that meeting anymore. And it didn't happen that much at the other meeting, but every once in a while, stuff like that would come up at the other club too. So that's part of it. I didn't like some of that, but it was tolerable in most cases. But the biggest thing is it just I don't know. Like I said, some of it just got watered down, and I really needed the everything that the Cleveland brings about. I mean, going back to now, our most popular episode is when you were talking about the absolutes. Nobody knew about that, which
Right.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but man, that was huge. Just
Yeah,
absolutely huge. So. But yeah, so that was like the thing with the meetings and stuff, which I thought was, again, it's different. I have no issue whatsoever with Wisconsin AA, but I mean, my heart and my soul, definitely still lives in Cleveland. So,
Mm-hmm. My ass does too.
right. Do you remember so if you came in, if you came in on a Wednesday, West Park might have been the first meeting that you actually went to then, right?
It was. They threw me in the back of the van. I was like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? And they took me to West Park. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I remember that too. Yeah, because we used to have to go.
It was not a passenger van. It was a cargo van. They threw about 20 of us in the back of a van. We sat on the floor, and they took us to West Park Men's. Oh yeah. Welcome to Cleveland.
Did you go to do setup? Because I was taken a couple of times to do setup.
No, not that first one.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I mean, the part of it was like it was just being able to get out of the Keating Center for a little bit. But yeah,
Sure.
whatever time West Park was at like 8:30 or something like that, we'd have to go in the like the late afternoon, early evening, and go set up all the tables. And then I mean, I was just the first time. Well, again, I got there on a Saturday. The first big meeting I went to was Keating Men's on Monday, and that was probably that meeting used to be at least 100 people. Then I walked into West Park, and I'm like, oh my God. Did you ever lead West Park?
Yeah, a couple times actually over the years.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. So more than what I did. Well, how did that go? The first time you led, were you overwhelmed by it, or how did that go just in general?
First time, I think I was about maybe 3 years sober, somewhere in there. And clearly I'd been to the meeting and stuff. It was, it was knew lots of people there. It was another meeting to lead, pitched how this thing works. Leading doesn't bother me anymore. Doesn't make me nervous. Of course it did in the beginning, but yeah, it's just going and talk about drunks and junkies, man. This is how this worked for me.
I just remember when I led there before. Well, speaking of our friend Ben, I think he's the one that either Ben or no Joe. I'm sorry, Joe's the one that got me to lead there because I think he had one set up and then called me. He's like, "I need you to lead." I'm like, "Okay."
Right.
So I remember standing up there, and then it just reminded me the first time I walked in there, being overwhelmed and not knowing everyone, and then standing up in front, and same thing at that point. And I remember mentioning it in the lead, saying, I'm like, man, when I was here my first time, 3 years ago or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
like not only did I not know anyone, I'm like, I was scared, I was overwhelmed. And at that point, I probably, at least faces, I knew more than half the faces in that
Right.
meeting. And I went ahead, and I think that on that one, I led for, it might have been a half hour. And somebody said afterwards, they're like, Jesus, you went ahead and talked for 30 minutes. I'm like, is there a fucking rule? I'm like, like you just said, Bob did it for an hour and a half. But,
Uh-huh.
but I mean, we were always told, and we always tried to, keep our leads to what did they used to tell us? 20 minutes or what?
No, anything over 20 minutes is bullshit.
Right.
Yep.
Which I tried, and that was a cool part about Who Do You Know being, a quick meeting like that. It was a 30-minute lead. Oh, thinking about that. Okay. I know you remember the stories, but this is okay. To give an example, everyone, of how structured Cleveland AAA is. This meeting we went to, Who Do You Know? Very structured, they had a limited opening. They had a lead that went for 30 minutes, and then they had some comments, and it was done. And that was our Friday meeting in our home group. So I know you remember them. So explain even one of the incidents that happened if somebody led long.
I remember, the one that comes to mind, it was some guy, he was local sports radio guy, right? So clearly he liked to hear his own voice. And he's up there leading, and there was an egg timer on the table, and they turned it to 30 minutes. And when that thing dinged, you stopped, and it dinged, and he kept going, and they kind of let him go for a couple of minutes, but he's just plowing forward, and they said that's it. They stopped him mid-sentence. You're done. And he was pissed, and we were all happy.
So, and there was a couple of them, and I remember that one, but I also remember Joe, Bob, and all the guys in the back at one point. All of them got up and walked out.
Yep.
On one guy, and then the one I remember Joe, Bob, and a couple other people when the guy kept again yammering on, because that's when you use that word in one episode. That's my favorite word now, yammering, because I do it. But they just got up and they started saying the Lord's Prayer, and the guy didn't know what to do. So he just crossed his arms and started saying the Lord's Prayer with everyone. But I do remember the one guy saying, like, when I forgot about the egg timer. That's funny. So when it dinged the one time, and the guy's like, he's like, I know I'm close, but he goes, I'm sure I could talk for another few minutes. That might have been the one when everyone walked out. And that was fucking funnier than hell. In one of them, I was there with a guy that I just started sponsoring, and this dude looked like a deer in the headlights. He didn't know. I'm like, I'll explain in a minute. So, but what they were teaching us was respect and how to follow the rules. Okay. So the rule they had this if you didn't like the meeting, they would tell people that if you don't like the rules of a meeting, you don't have to go. You don't have to be here. But here's what our rule is: that if you don't follow the rules, we're going to enforce them, and you're going to be done talking. You know, and that's what they did. And I thought, and again, that was that structure. But I'm sure, I mean, anyone that didn't know what was going on, like the sponsee I had, they're probably just kind of like, and he was just like, whoa. But I number one, I love those guys, and all of them. The last time I went to a meeting at Who Do You Know was probably a handful of years ago. And even after being in Wisconsin and being gone for a few years, I'd walk in, everyone still knew my name. Everyone said hi to me. I mean, I know both of us did. We just felt so welcomed at that meeting. So yeah, it was great. So, but so for everyone who knows, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear the split when I have to edit it, but we had a technical problem at about 25 minutes, and I'm trying to do the math in my head. I think we're over an hour now. But one way or the other, I think we're done talking. I had more things on my sheet here, but that gives us more things to talk about next week. But I think this turned out to be I don't know. I talked about my job for a while, but then I think all the sponsor stuff, I think that turned into a longer conversation than I thought it would be. But I think that's great stuff. Just because, I mean, these men, and I know I keep saying it, but these men that we're put in our lives, not just sponsors, but the men that taught us how to follow rules and just be good human beings, man. It just,
Right.
they're just a huge debt of gratitude to all of them. So, yeah.
Absolutely, man. Giving away what was given to them. Yeah.
Yeah. By all means. So I always know the answer to this, but anything else on your mind before we wrap up?
There's not a damn thing on my mind. It's a blank slate.
All right, brother. So, it is your turn. Go ahead and wing us all out of here.
All right, man. Thanks everybody for listening to another episode of Sober Not Mature. Go out there. It's Memorial Day weekend. If you happen to have someone in your circle that gave it away for this country. I don't want to get political, but they sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice so we can sit here and run our mouths over the internet. So remember them. Go buy a mattress and fuck off.
All right, brother. As always, I love you, brother, and I'll talk to you later.
Love you too. Everybody have a good one.
All right, man. Bye.
Bye.
As always, thank you for listening to another episode of Sober Not Mature. To access all of our content and interact with us, please visit our website, SoberNotMature.com. Thank you again for listening, and we will talk to you soon.